Alright, so today I'm installing a 4-stage converter in our 2012 Airstream. Airstreams, and I think most RVs, come with a single-stage converter, which basically charges the battery to full capacity. It just turns on and off, and has the potential of overcharging your batteries and destroying them in the process. So we've gone and ordered a 4-stage converter. This model just happens to be a Boondocker. It's a BD 1260HW. It was recommended to us as a pretty straightforward swap for the Airstream. So that's what we're doing today. The tools so far, I've got a electrician's multi-tool. It's like an 11-in-1 type of tool. Screw gun, a voltage tester, and some miscellaneous wire splicing tools, wire strippers, and maybe a pair of pliers. So far I've taken the cover off, the front cover. I've also taken the 120 volt breaker panel cover off, and I've taken out, there's 4 screws that hold the old converter in, and I'm going to take off the 2 screws that hold the 12 volt fuse panel on. So first, before you do anything, make sure you turn your incoming power off, turn your 120 volt power off. Also disconnect the batteries. I don't know if that's necessary, but I did just to be safe. And I'm going to double check and make sure there is no voltage here. This would beep if there was, just to be safe. I know I turned it off, but just to make sure nobody was outside and turned it back on or plugged it back in. So we're double checking and we're good. I'm also going to take a picture. I like to do this. You don't have to do this, but I like to take a picture of everything I'm going to be disassembling, so when I reassemble, I can make sure that I get the wires back in the same places that they came from. So these 2 wires, the white and the black, are the 120 volt current coming from the old converter. So you can see the black one here goes to the top breaker. So I'm going to take a picture of that. And this is the neutral wire going to the neutral bar. I'll take a picture of that. And we have a DC negative, just 12 volt negative going to the negative bus bar. I'll take a picture of that. And I'll just take a picture of the whole unit overall in case I need to reference it for any reason. Alright, so now we can get started. I'm going to go ahead and pull the panel off, the fuse, 12 volt fuse panel. There's 2 bolts that hold it on. No. I'm going to go ahead and take off my positive for the 120 volts, black wire, and take off the neutral from the neutral bus bar for the 120 volts. Now they have on our model, they have this wire nutted together. I'm going to disconnect this so I can pull it back through the grommet here. I'll put this back on. Alright. Go ahead and pull the negative. just swing that out of the way for now. Go ahead and fish these wires down. They're coming out of the front converter panel and then up. They're coming out of the converter panel and going up into the upper compartment. So we'll try to push those down and through. There's our old converter. Okay, my original plan was to kind of cannibalize this original converter case and set the new one inside. I had watched that on another video. I thought it was going to be the same, but of course the best laid plans never turn out the way you think. So as you can see, the new converter is bigger. And I don't know, after looking at it, it seemed better just to do a plan B. So that's what we did, or what I did. So I'm still going to cannibalize this case a little bit. I'm trying to utilize this front plate because these two screw holes is where the 12-volt DC fuse panel mounts. And rather than have to refabricate a panel along with everything else, I just figured I'd try to reuse this, and that's what I'm going to do. Move this old converter out of the way and we'll get into what I did. Okay, so the first thing I did was I fabricated up some brackets out of some 1.5 by 1.5 aluminum angle that I already had in the van. So I'm going to go ahead and mount those to the sides of the case. Alright, so I measured down 1 inch from the bottom of the 120 volt case and marked it, and then I measured back 1.5 inches, and that's where I'm going to mount these brackets. And then we're going to do the same thing, another bracket on the other side. So I've gone ahead and prepped our inverter. It comes hardwired for the 120 side, 120 volt side. I had to buy this strip of copper wire from the hardware store. It's going to be the chassis ground. The old inverter didn't have that. There's a place on the new one for it, so we're going to add that. I also went ahead and pre-wired the positive and negative for the 12 volt DC side. I used blue for my positive, white for the negative. And if you look on the side here of the converter, it's marked with a plus and a minus for positive and negative. Next I'm going to go ahead and mount the inverter to the floor. There's, on the side of the inverter, you can see here, there's 2 tabs in the front, 2 tabs on the back. The 2 back ones are very hard to get to, so what I did was I went ahead and measured and marked the rear ones, and I used a right angle drill, or what I have is a cordless ratchet, and I went ahead and pre-drilled and started the screws down with washers. So we'll go ahead and slide the inverter in. Try to line up the 2 screws in the back. There you go. Push it as far back as it'll go. And then I'm just using a stainless steel screw with a washer that has a rubber grommet on the bottom side. You can use whatever you want. This is just something I had, so this is what I'm using. I have a cordless ratchet that I put a 1/4 inch bit on, and a Phillips. And push this back tight and screw it down to the floor. Go the right way. And screw it down to the floor. Another screw, washer, rubber, and we'll do the same thing to the other side. Okay, that's it. Inverter's in there tight. Alright, next thing we're going to do is mount our faceplate. We're going to go ahead and push our wires through. There's factory grommets on it. This one's a little thicker because it's flat instead of round, but with a little coaxing, it'll make it through. You can leave a little excess back there just for the future in case something happens, but it's not necessary. Alright, next I just took some self-tapping screws that I had laying around, and I'll screw the face to the brackets that I made. Alright. So the positive, or the 120 can go up through this other grommet. We'll just set that aside. You can bend the chassis ground however you like. Set that aside. Okay, so the other part I had to fabricate was a place to mount the door, because once we remove the old converter, we had no place for the screw holes. The door mounted straight to the converter before. So I just took a piece of 1-inch aluminum flat bar and cut it the width of our panel here. And again, with self-tapping screws, I just went through my flat bar that I had into the existing panel. Alright, now if you look, you can see that the edges are higher. It's probably okay, but I didn't like it. So I just happen to have this extra piece of flat stock that I'm going to slide underneath there as a shim. So we'll just pry this up a little bit. Alright, so it's relatively flat now. So I have a nice flat spot to mount the door, which we'll come back to after we get everything else mounted. Now I'm going to go ahead and remount the fuse panel, the 12-volt fuse panel. Just 2 screws. Okay, tuck the wires back in there. I'll get some tie wraps later and fix that up. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and make up our connections. The white, which is the negative, is going to come up that one out of the way, and we're going to screw it into this negative bus bar for the DC negative. Go ahead and cut that, strip it. Go ahead and feed it where it goes, and thank you. And go ahead and tighten that down. I'm just tightening. These were all loose from the factory. I'm just tightening them up so they don't vibrate loose and fall down and short something out possibly. I doubt that would happen, but just in case. Alright, so we can tuck that wire back in there. Now the positive is going to come down to the bottom, and it's going to go right on this lug. So again, we're going to cut it, strip it. This is a fat lug. I'm going to strip it a little longer and double it over. Give it a little more meat to grab onto in there. And then we'll go ahead and tighten that down. If there's a little excess, you can push it back or use tie wraps or however you want to do it. Alright, so next we're going to go ahead and put on our chassis ground. Just kind of bend it around however you want. Try to make it look neat. I'm going to use this screw right here. So we'll try to bend it. Yeah. And tuck it in and tighten it down. Again, I'm going to tighten down these. Just in case. So our new inverter also comes with a ground wire, which we'll have to install. So basically the same thing as the chassis ground. Cut it, strip it. And tighten it down. Okay, so the next step, we're going to wire up the 120 volt side of the converter. There's two wires and a ground. We already hooked the ground up. I confirmed with the supplier that these don't matter. One's neutral, one's positive, but it doesn't matter which is which. So I've stripped it down, connected it to the wire from Airstream that feeds the converter, and we're going to go ahead and install that on our breaker. Tug. And the other wire is going to go up to our neutral bar, which is the top bar up here. All right. All right, so I've gone outside and I've reset the breaker, and I'm just going to check for power in here. So I'll turn my breaker back on to my converter. Negative, positive. It's 120 volts on my meter. And then we're going to check the DC side. So negative DC, positive DC, 14.8 volts. So we're good to go. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our cover. Okay. Now we can go ahead and install our door. Remember, this is where I made the bracket down below. Our latch is broken, so we have to use magnets. We'll go ahead and hook the batteries back up and we'll be all set.